Lying is a delightful thing, for it leads to truth. Lying is a delightful thing, for it leads to truth. This was early on in Crimes and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which, by the way, is a book that when I started it, I instantly knew it's actually not true. See, it's a book that I've heard so much over the years. It's been kind of on the, just like Kafka, I'd heard that name forever. So it was sort of in my, this must be somebody great. This must be a piece of great art and literature. And so when I started reading it, I think I already had the idea that I will like it. And then as I started reading, I did believe instantly that the book will be fascinating and there's going to be something in it for me. But the early reading was very, I have to say, was sort of dense, and the main character is, in the beginning, just not very likable, right? So it's so dark, and the main character is so not likable, and things are kind of, it's not, Dostoevsky doesn't write, at least maybe in the translation to English, it's not as beautiful writing as Tolstoy, and it's not
like riding a bike downhill through a nice landscape.
No. It's not.
It's effortful.
It doesn't have that lightheartedness, and it's not that poetic flow of describing things in the sentences, just like gallop. It's much more dense, and it's slow. It's like walking through mud a little bit, right? You walk through mud, and it's gray and rainy, and the character you don't like, and so you're like, why am I following this character? I don't even like him. I don't hate him, but I really don't care for him to be following him through the mud. Like, this is kind of work.
Yeah.
But I have to say, now I'm kind of at the second half of the book, and at around 40% into the book, he got me. Like, then I realized the shift in me, where it went from, there's pages that I really like, but there's also lots of pages where I just work through the mud, and I am not in this like state, the most beautiful state in reading, when you really get addicted to the book, where you really are delighted in reading and you don't want to stop and you want to start, right? I never had that for almost half the book. It was always a little bit of a work effort, and never that kind of effortless, I want more of this. And then it shifted. And now I'm kind of in this addicted state where I'm super invested in the characters, what is going on, the state it creates within me. And I'm like, I need to finish this book, and I want to know the resolution, and I want to know what's going to happen to these people, because I care now. But it took a while. This book took a while to get me there. But it's always delightful when it happens. It always is a beautiful thing once you are really in, once the people on the page have come to life so much that you care, that you deeply care and really need to know what is going to happen to them and how the story is going to unfold. And it's deep, dark shit, obviously. But in one of the few things that I highlighted in the first half of the book was the sentence, lying is a delightful thing, for it leads to truth. That sentence stood out to me, because we don't usually hear lying described as a delightful thing that points to truth, that leads to truth. Now, when I brought this up once with you, you had a response, which is a typical, which is like 50% of the time, maybe less, 40% of the time that I'm like excited about something like this, a remaining response would be, because if you look at it from the other side, this is wholly unremarkable and not true, right? This is kind of like, it used to be 70% of the time that would be the mean response, but I would say in the last years, it's not half the time. It's a little less than half the time, but it's a significant amount of time.
I already know at the end of this, I'm going to look like an, idiot, because, Dostoevsky, but I'm curious to understand more about this.
But what's your first response when I say lying is a delightful thing because it leads to truth?
So my very first that I didn't share was like, what? Wait, curiosity, right? And then it was, okay, probably in the way that what we lie about, we make an effort to conceal something about, and what we conceal is kind of the thing that is the truth, right? So it points towards that if we lie about something. And I was like, yeah, but everything in a way points to truth, whether it's lying or this, a joke points to truth, a comment points to truth, a compliment points to truth. I don't know. So I was like,
everything, that's true. Everything either points towards truth or away from it. But the way I think about this is that a lie is a much stronger signal towards truth than a half-truth. I actually tweeted this a day later, that actually half-truths are more dangerous to the truth than lies. Why? Because they're more muddled. Because the person that utters a half-truth understands himself less that what he's saying is not the truth, right? That is kind of a convenient, concealed, watered down, or morphed way of looking at the truth in a way. It's just a lie, but it feels true because it has true components in it, right? So when I say something that's sort of truth but is concealing certain areas, it's much harder for me to see what I'm doing. And it's much harder for other people to clearly see what I'm doing. So I'm muddying the waters. Versus a lie, it's sort of like eating something that's sort of sweet and a little bit bitter, and you don't know if it's going to be bad for you or not, right? It's mixed signals. Or eating something that is disgustingly bitter, where you might spit it out instantly because you know this might be dangerous. The way this tastes tells my body this is not for consumption, right? And I think in the same way, when people lie, the stronger the lie, the more awareness there is, an internal conflict there is about the very fact that I'm lying, and I can't forget that. And so that lie is hanging over my head like a flashlight that tells me that there's something that I'm concealing. And I think also to other people, not always obviously, but in the abstract, a strong lie might be much more obvious to spot than when we are saying things that are half-truths or things that we're unsure about. I think thinking about a lie as a strong, just like a stronger signal that there is stronger signal towards where the real truth is. Just like in a similar way to the philosophy of when I'm really angry at somebody, right? Anger, you're like, we could go, anger also points to truth, right? Love points to truth. But I think we think of lies, I think without having thought about it, intuitively we would say if somebody just says a half-truth, that's better than saying a bold lie. But I think the bold lie, maybe in the abstract, in the long term, is kind of a more inconvenient or a stronger sign towards truth than the half-truth. That's kind of the way that I'm thinking or marinating or interpreting this. Not to say that lying is good, but people lying is an important step in the dance. I think a more useful step in the dance of trying to figure out the truth than many other things that might be more tamer versions of what we call a lie.
Maybe I also am missing the context of where this came up and everything. So, right. But to me, a good lie actually fits in very well with a lot of truth and connects to a lot of truth, right? And it's wrapped into truth versus a bad lie. And good, I mean like convincing. Versus a bad lie is a lie that's like completely undetached to any truth and not related to any truth. And it's like when I went to school, there was a boy who said, "Oh, I found a treasure chest full of gold in my staircase," right? And it's yeah, okay, come on. Benjamin.
Benjamin, come on, Benjamin. We all know that's not true. Meanwhile, Benjamin had found fucking gold.
He's like, okay, bitches.
The fucking cynical, 9-year-olds were pushing up their glasses on the, no, Benjamin, you did not find the treasure. Yeah, that is interesting.
in Anna Karenina, right, that chapter where she is losing her mind, all of that madness and insanity works because it's always detached to something real, and then she kind of makes a little twists and interprets it a different way or sees it a different way, right? But it's not completely detached from reality.
Let's actually read that part. And maybe we won't be able to read the whole thing because it's like a bunch of pages. But
Yeah.
I know that I've highlighted a few things as examples. So this is at the very end of the book, Anna Karenina. And this woman has gone through a lot of turmoil, has made a lot of decisions, had a lot of drama in her life. And this last bit describes basically her going insane or having a psychotic breakdown, and at the very end, taking her own life, right? Now, the thing that struck me when reading that bit, and then I'll highlight, I'll read some pieces that are highlighted here, that I've highlighted, and we can discuss and debate this. But the way I read that whole part, the reason why I thought it was incredible, one of the most incredible bits in the book, was that on that ride to the train station, right? She's on that carriage, and she's seeing people, and there's little situations everywhere. And she's having an inner dialogue, and the inner dialogue is going kind of erratic between her own life and her thoughts and her situations, the people, and then observing others externally and having thoughts about them. And when I read it, all the external things that she saw were actually pointing to parts of her life where she didn't live the truth, where she had intense anger. So she would see, a family trying to go on a vacation, having a good time, and she would think, you cannot run away from the truth.
Run away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the
on your
dog that you
vacation.
bring
Yeah, it's gonna be.
gonna help you.
But there's many parts. I'll read them. I haven't read them again since the first reading, so I'll see how it plays out, unfolds in this reading. But to me, every single thing she would see outside on the way to her death, and that she had vile, angry, despicable thoughts about, were the things manifested, like the playing out of parts of her own life, and the anger and disgust she had at those people, those situations, was the anger and disgust she had towards herself because of those pieces of her life, or the way that she lived through that. So the first one is the one that we both obviously instantly remembered, which is her seeing the kind of family that looked like they're all prepped up and all on the way to some kind of nice trip, weekend trip or whatever else. And she's like, no, you're going in vain. She mentally addressed a company in a coach and four who were evidently going out of town for some merriment. And the dog you're taking with you won't help you. You won't get away from yourselves, right? That you won't get away from yourselves. That points to so much of what she did in her life. Always like running away, we're going to go, overseas. We're going to go to this new house. We're going to live this new life. We're going to do running away from herself. But anywhere she would get to, she brought herself with her, right? And that was part of her suffering. And then there's a part where she thinks of Vronsky, her like love affair, and she's like, what was he looking for in me? Not love so much as the satisfaction of his vanity.
Vanity. Yeah.
And then you go, well, what was Anna looking for in Vronsky?
Yeah.
What made her fall in love so crazily in a man that she had spoken to 2 sentences at a train station and was willing to risk her husband, her son, and her whole life for? She didn't know that man. What made her? It was the vanity. It was the delight that such a man was falling for her, and she had this magical spell over him. That's what lured her in, right? Nothing else. So she's like angry at him and thinking these terrible, hurtful thoughts that he wasn't even looking for love. He was just looking for his own vanity in her. But that's actually what she was looking in him.
Yeah.
Then at some point she sees some other dude walking around, and he looks like, I don't know, some kind of a lawyer or something, and he walks with a kind of swagger, and he has like nice hair, his hair done nicely, and his kind of his official paperwork or whatever under his arm, and she goes, "This one wants to astonish everybody," and is very pleased with himself. Right? This one is astonished, wants to astonish everybody, and is very pleased with himself. And you go, what did she do? What was her main concern? Yeah. What was so great about her was that she was great at astonishing everybody, right? And for a while, she was very pleased with herself until she wasn't. And then later, I highlighted this: if I could be anything else but a mistress who passionately loves only his caresses, but I cannot and do not want to be anything else. And by this desire, I provoke his disgust, and he provokes my anger, and it cannot be otherwise. It cannot be otherwise. I know that he would not deceive me, that he doesn't have any intentions toward Princess Sorokin, that he is not in love with Kitty, that he will not be unfaithful to me? I know all that. But it's none the easier for me. If he is kind and gentle towards me out of duty without loving me, and I am not to have what I want, that is 1,000 times worse even than anger. It's hell, and that is what we have. He has long ceased loving me, and where love stops, hatred begins.
Hate.
Yeah. It's such deep shit. I mean, again, out of context, I assume... Well, I'm sure these things don't hit as hard, right? When you've gone through the travel of her whole life and drama, these things and these feelings she has towards certain people and thoughts hit differently. Yeah. But it struck me as significant how she was thinking, if I cannot have his pure love and only have his duty and honesty and devotion, then that's even worse than that. But the crazy thing here is that one has to ask, did they ever had real love, however you want to define that, right? They were in love, but did they ever had the chance to develop love? Because their life story was so tumultuous that they went from madly, unexplainably in love to risking everything and having such huge drama that it was just a managing of all the drama. And then they were stuck with each other in a really difficult place. There was no time. There was no healthy, organic time for a seed of love to grow into a real tree, right? Kind of through themselves in such a tumultuous way. Now, here's another thing where she sees somebody else and thinks thoughts about that person that are really, I think, pointing to her own life. A beggar woman with a child. She thinks she's to be pitied. Aren't we all thrown into the world only in order to hate each other and so to torment ourselves and others? Students going by laughing. Soyoza, that was her son, she remembered, I also thought I loved him and used to be moved by my own tenderness, but I did live without him, exchanged him for another love, and didn't complain of the exchange as long as I was satisfied by that love. And with disgust, she remembered what it was that she called that love. Yeah. Right? She looks at that beggar woman with her child and is like, you think we should pity you. We think that you love your child, but all this is nothing. It's like, motherfucker, because, because that's how you feel about yourself. Right. Is how you
went
to
move to Italy in a mansion and have an artist life there, right? Abandoned your son.
And now because there's so much bitterness in herself and anger and disgust about herself, but she doesn't recognize that. At no point in here is she talking about herself. At no point before she dies does she go, I did not love. I had too much vanity. Right.
There's like there's a splinter in that part, right, where she thinks to her son and how she exchanged his love, right?
But no, it's not. You know why? Because she is not critical with herself. She's critical with the concept of love. Right? She says, you think you love your child, and we think I was also once, in brackets, deceived in thinking I love my child, but then I threw away that love for somebody else. So what is love? Nothing. It's all a piece. That is the problem here. She's at no point thinking, I had vanity. I'd never really loved this person. I was running away from myself and my problems. I did a despicable thing of not protecting my child and honoring that child. At no point is she questioning her own life. She's questioning life. She's not, giving a verdict over her love to these people. She's giving a verdict over the concept of love. Life is just a bunch of bullshit. We're tormenting each other. Love doesn't exist. We're all just running away from truth. We're all just full of it. But it's not all of us that are this. It's you. You are this way. You have lived your life this way. And now your whole reality is, falling apart, and you're in this psychotic episode and on your way to your death, to your suicide, which is the logical consequence of thinking about life this way and being in this much of suffering. You see the world in her eyes. She sees the world so clearly right now. She understands these things. In her eyes, she now has a truth that everybody else is too foolish to accept. Right? How dark and useless and empty life is. And she sees all these examples in these other people, but it's just herself seeing her own life. Right? But she cannot accept responsibility for
also
it.
The almost entire length of the book since they got together, she's always doing this thing where she's like, outwardly, I'm not worthy of happiness. I don't even desire happiness anymore because who am I? I did all these bad things. I'm a bad woman, right? But everything she does is to the satisfaction of her happiness. And then, but outwardly she's keeps saying, I don't even want to be happy anymore. I don't deserve to be. I cannot even be happy anymore because of the bad things I did, right? But it's all through the lens of society's view of her.
Yeah, she's playing a role, even in the moments that are most intimate about her inner life. It appears that she's not aware of how she's not accepting her true thoughts and motivations, and hence she's never able to understand herself and make the right decisions. And also that self-deception is escalating so quickly through that cascading of decision-making that it becomes an impossible riddle, a labyrinth that she's so lost in that eventually she's like, this is life, just a labyrinth where everywhere there's a dead end. This is pointless. This is all, people think this is some beautiful garden, but it's not, right? But it's not that that's the world. It's that's her world and the world she created. Because she was never honest with herself. She was not honest about her marriage and why she got together with her husband in the first place. She was not honest what was fancy to her about that little spark and flirt with Vronsky. She was not honest about her relationship with her son. Maybe she had never developed honest feelings to her son and had overproportionally devoted herself to her son because her marriage was so empty. Her life was so empty. So she took on the role of being an incredible mother without being able to honestly feel that love truthfully. And on and on and on and on. It was, and as you said, even the things that she did out of, I'm such a good person. Look, I don't believe I'm good. I don't believe I'm wise. I don't believe when you look at her actions, at every point in her actions, she's trying to maximize her own happiness. She's trying to maximize to get the perfect results for herself. She's doing this despicable thing of cheating on her husband. And then in her mind goes, even if he would throw me out in the street and I would lose everything and he would spit on me and hit me, that would be what I deserve. But when her husband forgives her and loves her and wants to protect her and says, I'm at your mercy, I'll do whatever you want, she hates him for it. What is that? What exactly is that? And then when he inevitably gets back to a bad place himself and he's like, you know what, I'm going to punish you. You're not going to get our son. He's going to stay with me. all along the way, she's like, I'm going to lose my son. And even if I lose my son, and losing my son is going to part of it. At first, she was like, that's the thing I cannot do. So I cannot leave my husband. And then she's like, oh, that might be the right thing. And maybe I should lose my son. And then when she does, she's out of her mind about it. And it's like, what are you doing? Everything she says, she contradicts with her behavior at some point later on. Because she's playing a role to herself and to others. It's really the inner decay, the like falling apart internally by not being willing to see yourself, right? To really see, what are my motivations? Who am I? What do I want? And then at no point being able to accept the consequences of some of that behavior, and always kind of morphing and warping the outer world. Even the whole episode towards the end, before she takes her life, it's this kind of nothing really happened that is that crazy, right? She wanted actually the lover, Vronsky, he is the one that lives much closer to the truth, because he does sacrifice so many things for her, right? And then she, wants to leave that house again and move again to some other place. And then he's like, he really doesn't want to do that, but eventually gives in. He's like, all right, I love her so much, I'll do that too. And he, instead of doing it in 2 days, he's like, we're going to do this in 3 days or something. And she's had this whole psychotic breakdown over that, right?
You know what was interesting about that part also? That was one of the few parts where I read it. And it brought back memories when I read it as a teenager. And as a teenager, I read it and I was like, this is too much. Come on. I was like, I couldn't. Now, having looked into the barrel of life a little bit deeper, I read it and it's like, oh, shit. Yes.
Yes. And most of us will not be pushed to that extreme.
Yeah.
But all of us have visited that path to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Where you're not honest and clear and clean with yourself, and you project the inner demons to the outer world, and you think it's the world or the people or this person, and then we're in kind of turmoil, internal and external turmoil. That if you keep on long enough, like she does, the end station, the destination is losing grip of life and then losing life itself. The very last thing is the kind of the paragraph where she kills herself. So let's finish with that. Sitting on a star-shaped sofa and waiting for the train, looking with revulsion at the people coming in and going out, they all disgusted her. She thought of how she would arrive at the station, write a note to him, and of what she would write, then of how he was now complaining to his mother, not understanding her suffering, about his situation, and how she would come into the room and what she would say to him. Then she thought of how life could still be happy, and how tormentingly she loved and hated him, and how terribly her heart was pounding. The bell rang. Some young man went by, ugly, insolent, and hurried, and at the same time conscious of the impression they produced. All right, it's actually much later where she throws herself in the train station. I don't want to go that far. But again, look, the thing that I find so interesting is how much it registers on her radar, this young man, ugly, insolent, hurried, but at the same time conscious of the impression they produce. Because that's all she did her whole life. It's like producing impressions. That's all. There's no depth to any of the relationships she's had, but she was so impressive and was so good in creating impressions. And now when she sees that in others, all she sees is hurried, ugliness, pettiness, vanity.
And also, after that initial spark of love with Vronsky in the very beginning of the book, right? And then she returns back and the husband picks her up at the train station, and she sees the husband, and immediately she sees these ridiculous ears, and she sees everything that's wrong, and everything is, and she never knows. And then she meets her friends, and everything again is like turned into this disgusting, repelling. How can I not have noticed this before?
Yes, but isn't it interesting that the first thing that she notices when she arrives at the train station, and she's had that little flirt with Vronsky, and then she sees her husband. Her husband in that part of the book is described. He shows up at the train station as loving as he can, right? He missed her and he has real tenderness in her heart for her, and he's really delighted.
Really busy day, but made time to pick her up,
to come and pick her up, and
makes an effort.
Yeah, and the first thing she notices is a vanity thing, is an external thing, something in his ear that is fat and disgusting, right? Isn't that interesting? Like, that's the first thing she picks up, is on something visual, right? That she finds despicable. And then also, what's one of the first impressive things that Vronsky does to impress her? What is it? It's him, after somebody had thrown themselves in front of a train, it's him, because he wanted to impress her, going off from that company to pay some money to the wife of the person that jumped over the train, so that somebody would come and thank him and tell him, so she would be impressed that he's done such a nice thing, right?
And there was even someone who mentioned that before, right, about the financial status of the widow or something like this. Right?
Yeah, and she was, again, because it was proper form. At no point do you really believe that people really cared in that circle about some poor person jumping in front of a train. She was also in proper form in the group of persons, being very, very holy and very like, oh my God, this is such a tragedy, how terrible for the people. But it's all just words, right? There was no feeling to it, because she was delighted at flirting with him. That was all. It was a flirt, but it was like, oh my God, how shocking. Isn't that really terrible? And then he goes off to pay some money to impress her. Oh, look, what kind of an impressive thing I did. But at no point ever later on in the book do they ever do something nice to others because they really want to do charity, right? You know, there's always some filling a hole or keeping up impressions to others. And then, you know, beautifully and tragically, it's written where that part where they meet and fall in love and have the flirt, which is the train station, at that empty little thing of somebody's dying and he's paying money to the widow to impress her at the train station. That's kind of where the loop closes, and on her way to the train station, you know, she's losing her mind and then taking her life in the very same way, right? But also, the thing with her suicide in this situation is that she's driven to suicide partially because she's losing her mind, partially because she's seeing how, it's suicide as revenge. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. Because she's not taking a life because her pain and suffering is so big and her weight is so big where she just sits there and she doesn't even know why. Everything's so dark that she just can't. She feels, some people, they suicide to get rid of the burden for themselves and the world. They feel themselves and the world is such a burden that they're like, I want to rid myself of this. But she does it as revenge. She sees the world as so vile, as so ugly, as so despicable, that this is the final act to beat them all, right? To make Vronsky, to break his heart, to make him regret.
And she even thinks it leading up to it, where there's like, I know he's in the right, but I got to make him regret it, right? And then she says it. It's like,
that's it. This is her. She is painted this picture of reality, and all the people in the world is so despicable and disgusting that her final act is to kill herself, because that's the most painful thing she can think of to everybody else. And the most final thing, that's the thing she can do, and they cannot even respond anymore. They'll have to live with that their whole life, right? Yeah. And so this is the most painful thing she could do to Vronsky, the most painful thing she could do to her husband or her ex-husband, the most painful thing she could do to her son, the most painful thing she could do to all the people that love her and that she has tormented along the way. None of these people have initiated any torment towards her, right? She has been the cause of all that torment to all these people. And then at the end, she takes her life in the most painful way she can think of to others, right? Yeah. Wow, that shit is so deep and so dark. But it is in its pattern, a very human story. Yes. Again, not all people that go on that journey go to the final destination of it, right? Walk it all the way to that point. Right. But how many things have we done to hurt others because we were so hurt by them that we could not think of, all we wanted to do is punish them, even if the punishment was terrible for us as well. Yeah. In small as well as in big ways. You know, one small way that we've discussed in the past where we were very similar is that when we would get, or I would get mad at a lover, somebody I was in a relationship with, I would go so cold and so distant and feel like even when mentally the whole situation and emotionally had passed, I'm like, you know, I'm not even mad anymore. I have to keep up with this because the punishment I've handed out is not sufficient. So, you know, I would have been fine after 2 hours, but I will keep this up for 3 days, 5 days. And all along, I will suffer too. I hated feeling this cold, this tense, this distance all the time, although I didn't really feel that way. I hated it, but it was the proper punishment because my mind was telling me I need to punish this person. And so what is that, right? That is an insane act. It's nothing else than an insane act of self-mutilation in some way and self-punishment to punish others. And it's also a lack of recognition that something happened here that I'm not willing to deal with honestly. I'm not willing to tell this person, this is exactly how I feel, or this is my boundary and I will not accept this anymore. And then if you're fully honest in your pain, honest in your boundaries, there's no reason for punishment, right? You just set the boundaries and you communicate clearly, and the people that don't fit within that framework will leave your life. There's no reason to hand out punishments in that framework. You have to punish others when you're not honest with yourself and them, when you don't set boundaries, and so you allow them to commit crimes. Maybe they're not even aware of it, or you see crimes everywhere committed, and the other person doesn't even know. I had this once with a girl that I was dating that I went to a party with, and I had a certain image in my mind of how I wanted her to act in that party towards me, and I never communicated that. She didn't know that, so she acted totally differently, and I was so mad at her and became so cold. And then I realized the insanity of this. Like, I'm now about to hand you a punishment for a crime that we've never talked about. I never told you this would be a crime, and you never agreed that you shall live in this country where this is a crime and play towards this role as a citizen of it. It's all insanity, and it's all projection, and at the end of the day, it all points towards something inside of us that we're not honest with.
I also love the masterfully twisted logic of Anna Karenina in that chapter where it's like, oh yeah, we're leaving in 3 days, in 2 days, right? And then from that moment on, everything that he does is proof that he doesn't love her anymore, that he's just wanted to get rid of her but feels burdened and responsible. And no matter what, everything it gets twisted and turned, and it's indisputable in her mind that this is what this means, and he's doing this only because of that, right? And when you read that, it's okay.
And you know, there's a beautiful dance of truth there, because he apparently loves her, but also in the beginning it's like 99% love and 1% a little bit of like a burden or doubt, and then it's 90-10, and then it's 80-20, and after what they went through, he, you know, at the worst point, he's maybe at a 60-40. Right.
Still has a good life. He's still like social, for the blame in society is on the woman, not on the man, right? So he's still going out, meeting people, meeting friends, doing things, going places. She's at home, the pariah woman, where every once in a while someone comes to visit her, but they are also not the centerpiece of society. Right?
But also, he has love for her, but he also feels the burden at times, feels responsible.
Yeah.
And she picks up on that, right? And now she could pick up on how much he still loves her going through all of this, or she can pick up on the burden or the doubt or the responsibility. But what does she do? She zeroes out of all the love and she amplifies all of that. And even if she didn't take her life, what would happen? Through her behavior, punishing him for seeing that he feels burdensome, she would only increase the burden he feels and decrease the love until she made that her, her prediction would come true, would be a self-realizing, self-fulfilling prophecy because of her actions, not because it was inevitable. Because she chose to look at one area of him and amplify it through her behavior versus the other area, which is the one that she wants. Why? Out of fear, right? And also him as a final point for this. This book is so beautiful. This book is all of all of humanity in one book through one story. And there's the counter to Anna, which is not the main part of the book. That's why it's not called, that's why it's not called after him. But there's the counterpoint of a person that, that lived a very different life to the life of Anna Karenina and where he ends up with. But Vronsky, after she kills herself, you don't know that, you're not there yet. It doesn't matter. It's not that important of a point, so I can make it, right? As one thing that Vronsky does after she kills herself, much later in the book, is that he's enrolls himself to go and fight at a war of I think of a neighboring country, right, to support their cause. But it's really to sacrifice his life. And publicly, it's seen in incredible esteem. Again, Vronsky is doing something that people look at and go, look, he's so tormented by her suicide that he's going to do this heroic thing and fight for a great cause and, sacrifice his life for it. But when you look into Vronsky's motivation, it really is the violence he has in his heart, and he just wants to go somewhere to act out that violence because he's so enraged and angry about how his life turned out and how this last act of her turned out that he wants to kill. Right? He wants to go somewhere and kill and be killed. So the motivation is really violence, but the society is look, in his uniform and with his sword, and he's gonna be a commander and go into this war to help our neighbors and do a good thing. How heroic and self-sacrificing. But it's not. There's nothing heroic and self-sacrificing about it at all.
When it comes to Vronsky, there was another chapter that I found really interesting also, where he met his old classmate, right? And whatever it was, classmate or from military history, and that guy was all focused on his career, and by the time was a general and had all the wealth and social capital and everything. And they had this conversation, and it was this I don't care about these things anymore. I'm in love. I care about more deeper things, right? And the other one was oh yeah, I thought so too. But and they have this argument, and both are kind of pretending that they've got it all figured out. But it was a delicious section.
Yeah, because the way that Tolstoy writes it, in between the lines and before and after, that what Vronsky was telling the guy is full of shit, but is also partially true. And so he himself is at times confused about what is real here, right? He's at times tormented about his career and all his ambitions not panning out the way he want them. And part was, what was the start again? The start of his decline in his career is not the affair with Anna. That is an accelerator of the decline of his career. The start of the decline of his career was that he was sent to some post to do, he was given some task, some job, and he rejected it. And why did he reject it? He rejected it because he thought it would be seen as an act that he doesn't care about his career, so he's not taking this vanity step as a career-hungry person, and that would give him higher status, and he miscalculated. And people were like, well, we've given him this fast track because he's such a career-driven, and he's not taking it. Well, this means that he's not the guy. He's not that interested, so we're gonna degrade him now and slow him down. So he did this thing to pretend he's not so career obsessed, to make his career go faster, because people would see how pure his heart and intentions are, and he miscalculated, right? That was the beginning of the decline.
Accept it also.
Yes.
And he can't, because he still has options, right? He still could get back on track. But even then, when he's at that point where he could say, all right, I'm gonna do this again, he still has to hold, like he's so afraid of losing face that he holds onto it and is like, no, I don't care about these things.
Yes. Now, this is losing face, right?
Yeah.
Holding on to your person, your personality, the perception of people of you and your own inner image of you is really what is driving him to many, many poor decisions that are in conflict with his inner truth. He's always in conflict with his inner truth to hold on to that.
Yeah. Also, when he got into painting, right?
Yes.
That entire thing.
There's a beautiful quote in there that I won't be able to pick up as quickly, where the real painter that they meet at the village, how he thinks of Vronsky and his painting.
Yeah, you shared that quote.
Maybe I can quickly pull it up on WhatsApp, because I think I took a picture of it.
Yeah, you did.
But I'm sending so many quotes your way. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. So this is a part about that painter and his opinion on Vronsky. And now Vronsky is a super rich guy, and he's in this tiny village, and he's like obviously interested in art, and he's want to be a patron of the art. He wants to give this poor kind of grumpy artist guy money and fame.
Even this, right? It's so interesting because before they meet him, Vronsky has already made up his mind and wants that artist to be a struggling artist whom he comes to help and save, right?
Yes.
And then he has this friend who knows the guy. He's like, actually, he's kind of, he's not doing great, but he's kind of, and Vronsky's, but surely he needs help, right? Surely he's in dire need.
Yeah, because
and the guy's
I
like,
want him to. I want him to. So, okay, so is the final quote before we wrap up for today. So this is something that artist is thinking about Vronsky. He knew it was impossible to forbid Vronsky to toy with painting. He knew that he and all the dilettantes had every right to paint whatever they liked, but he found it unpleasant. It was impossible to forbid a man to make a big wax doll and kiss it, but if this man with the doll came and sat in front of a man in love and began to caress his doll the way the man in love caressed his beloved, the man in love would find it unpleasant. Mikhailov, which is the artist, experienced the same unpleasant feeling at the sight of Vronsky's painting. He felt it ridiculous, vexing, pathetic, and offensive. I'm like, this is so fucking dope. So beautifully expressed. You can't forbid somebody to make a plastic doll and kiss it, right? I mean, everybody can do whatever they want. But if that person sat next to you and was doing anything you do with your woman that you love, you would find it very irritating. That would be and that was what he was seeing. And that was also the truth. It was Vronsky looking at an artist and pretending he's an artist to make himself appear a certain way without it being the real thing. He was not in love with art. He was not in love with painting. It was just all for impressions. It was all for, showing off to society, which is really the core of Anna Karenina, is the role and the danger of society in our lives, like playing to society, playing the game that society lays out for us, playing to impress, playing to charm, playing for opinions, playing for reputation, playing for admiration, playing for approval of society. You play that game and leads to really, really, really terrible places. And that's really, I think, the core theme of that entire book.
Yeah. this is also with that artist, Mikhailov or whatever his name was, right? I loved how he flip-flopped in like looking at these people and seeing like, oh, again, these rich infatuated, now they come here to the artist and they think, whoever, whatever, I don't care what they think, right? To then, when they look at it and suddenly he's like, he sees, oh my God, they see the magnificence in my work. And then he's flip-flopping back and forth between these two modes where it's like, these people know nothing. It's like, oh, they see the greatness in my work.
Yeah. When he is being when he's being complimented, he can't resist to fully accept.
But then he also picks up when they make a compliment simply because of politeness, and then he gets again in this vicious like, these people, right?
What an amazing book! But that last part, especially to me. The walk to the travel to the train station, which is her final
Super
part of her
intense.
life, is so intense, and it's to me such a potent summary. At no point is it like, and she was reviewing her life and thinking through all the steps of the things. It's so masterfully hidden, but that is it. Is she's going through her entire life and seeing it played out in the world in front of her and other people, and is so angry, so at war, so disgusted by it, that she can't but be driven to suicide as revenge, right? Wow, what the fuck?